All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking a truly thought-provoking piece of writing by Nigerian policy influencer Oluyomi Ola David. The piece we're diving into is titled Bias Glass is Fragile. And what we're going to do here is examine her central thesis. Now, keep in mind, she brings a deeply philosophical yet highly practical lens to the whole concept of gender inclusion. She isn't just throwing statistics at us. She's actually looking at the very mechanics of human thought and societal structure. So let's step right into her mindset.
I want to start exactly where she starts, with this absolutely incredible opening hook. Listen to this. She writes, "When all the fanfare is over, in a patriarchal world with patriarchal norms, only just men can esteem women implicitly." I mean, take a second to really process that. She's immediately drawing a very stark line between performative allyship, what she calls the fanfare, the celebrations, the social media posts, and the actual, deeply entrenched reality of a patriarchal world. She's arguing that once the noise dies down, the true measure of equity relies on something much quieter, yet infinitely stronger.
Section 1. The Fragility of Bias and Cognitive Failures.
Okay, so Oluyomi frames the battleground of bias in a really unique way. She doesn't just see bias as some bad habit, she literally diagnoses it as a cognitive failure. On one side, she argues that bias is created by distorted thought processes. She specifically names insecurities, fallacies, and half-truths as the real roots of prejudice. So to her, breaking the bias means we have to move away from those distortions and elevate logical competence and reason. She genuinely believes that breaking the bias begins with the folks whose minds aren't clouded by all these distortions. It's just a brilliant philosophical framework, honestly, because it repositions gender inclusion. It's not just a moral imperative anymore, it's a triumph of reason over flawed logic.
Building on that logic, she introduces a very specific and vital role, the absolute necessity of what she terms just men, promoting family-friendly gender bills, especially when women are unavailable to defend their own cause. The word just is doing a whole lot of heavy lifting here. She isn't just calling for any men, she's calling for men driven by justice and reason. Because, think about it, she acknowledges a stark reality. There are rooms where policies are made, where bills are passed, where women are simply not present to advocate for themselves. In those moments, in that patriarchal world we just talked about, it falls squarely on the shoulders of these just men to uphold equity.
Moving on to Section 2, A Necessary Cultural Reset, Systemic Changes.
She asserts that in places like Nigeria and across most of Africa, overcoming bias is definitely not going to happen with just a few minor tweaks. It demands a massive, three-pronged structural change. She states it requires a cultural reset, an ideological shift, and a concerted reorientation program. She's diagnosing a deep, systemic issue here. A history of colonization, layered right on top of existing patriarchal norms, means the very foundation needs a hard reset. An ideological shift means completely changing what people believe to be true, and a reorientation program implies deliberate, structured education to guide people toward that new reality.
And to demand this cultural reset, she actually redefines culture itself. Notice her highly specific behavioral definition here. She doesn't define culture by traditional clothing or food or art. She defines it as how we judge behavior, the manner of our reasoning, and what informs our decisions. By framing culture as the internal mechanism of judgment and reasoning, she makes her proposed cultural reset a deeply personal cognitive revolution. Basically, if culture is how we reason, then fixing a biased culture means fixing how we think.
Section 3. Partnership over Supremacy. This is where we get to the core of her solution, and it requires a profound shift in perspective. She asked us in all our shared humanity to humbly acknowledge the varying leadership roles that both men and women play. She contrasts a base struggle for supremacy in our functional roles with the need to prize effective partnerships. Think about that phrasing for a second, a base struggle. She views the fight for dominance as lower, less evolved, and ultimately super destructive. The higher, more logical path, remember her big emphasis on reason earlier, is to prioritize humble, effective partnerships that actually respect the different strengths everyone brings to the table. And when we finally abandon that struggle for supremacy and actually work together, united in our diversity, she outlines a very clear, logical sequence of positive outcomes. Step 1, we keep peace. Without that base struggle for dominance, the conflict just naturally subsides. Step 2, we build resilience. A true partnership is inherently stronger and way more adaptable than a fractured system. And finally, step 3, we chart paths for a sustainable future. This sequential logic shows that a sustainable future isn't just some corporate buzzword for her.
It is the natural endpoint of peace and resilience, which are only made possible by genuine partnership between men and women.
Now, it's super important to recognize that her essay, while deeply personal and philosophical, plugs directly into massive global movements. The tags she uses at the end of her piece, like hashtag SDG5, which is the UN's Sustainable Development Goal for gender equality, hashtag break the bias, hashtag human capital, these show that she sees this shift in individual reasoning as the actual fuel for global development. She's connecting the micro, how you judge behavior in your own mind, straight to the macro, achieving worldwide gender inclusion and economic sustainability.
To really appreciate the weight of this explainer, we should briefly frame her background. Oluyomi Ola David is a Nigerian policy influencer. In her own words, she is driven by a profound love for people, a concern for global transformation, and her faith, noting that she sees God as the wheel within her wheels. She aims to generate solutions, influence strategy, and provide real clarity. And honestly, I think we can all agree that clarity is exactly what she brought to the complex issue of bias in this text.
So the absolutely crucial point we're left with is her final, incredibly provocative thought. She writes, "Every day we are awake is a grant to fund the change we expect." It's just a stunning metaphor. She views our daily waking life, our time and our energy, not as a given, but as a grant, an investment handed directly to us. And the purpose of that grant is to fund change, not just to hope for change or to celebrate it with a bunch of fanfare, but to actively fund it with our logic, our partnerships, and our everyday actions. Based on the philosophy we've explored today, how will you use your reason to break the bias? How will you fund the change today?